So anyhow, I'm going to talk about a number of things today. Be with you for about an hour, and I'm going to share some insights with you. And I hope that this information proves to be useful for you. Maybe get some ideas that might help you and your family and your child do better. And that's what I want from life. Oops, let's see here. Why is that not moving? I clicked on the right button, but it did not go. So let me see what's happening here. This should go. There we go. All right. So what I want for every child, whether they have a disability or not, is for them to get the most out of life. We only have a short period of time on earth here, and we want to get the most out of it, get the most enjoyment out of it. So, okay. We want every child to be happy, of course. Okay, we want them to enjoy their life that they have here. We want them to have friends, somebody to interact with that they can share their experiences with, and just for moral support from others. And of course, we want them to be able to care for themselves. So when you have a child with a developmental disability, you know, we're in a position where we've got to say, okay, they're not learning some of the skills the way typically developing children are learning the skills. So how can we help them, you know, get the most out of life? And of course, I've been around for a long time, and I know what parents really want. They tell me all the time, you know, they want their child to be able to go to school, and they want their child not only to go to school, but if possible, to be able to learn what other children are learning in school. So in other words, you know, if it's possible for them to get caught up from their developmental delays very quickly and early in life, then they do have a chance to perhaps start learning at the same rate as typically developing children. And of course, that would be the goal for all of the children. However, we do know from the research and just from treatment outcomes, even under the best of circumstances, you know, more than half of the individuals who had the best treatment possible, early intervention, early intensive behavior intervention, still more than half of them are going to require some type of special services as they go through the educational programs in schools. But what does it take if we're going to try to get these kids caught up? You know, what does it take? Well, if we're going to be successful in educating these children, we need to focus on many skills. They need to learn so many skills. And again, when you start looking at the diagnostic criteria for an individual on the autism spectrum, you know, you've got communication delays and social interaction delays. And so we've got a lot of skills to learn. It's not just about academics, but it's also about all kinds of basic language skills and observational skills that really make it possible for them to learn at a rapid rate. So we need to focus on those language skills. Again, that's one of the primary diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder is they've got communication delays. So we want to hit that one head on. We also want to hit the social interaction skills. But again, if you don't have the language skills, how are you going to socially interact with somebody? And so we need to focus on the language, but we also have to focus on how do we get these individuals to appreciate and enjoy the interactions with others, not just because we want them to, but because it delivers something to them that they get out of it, that they want to continue interacting with others. And of course, one of the things that's often very difficult for us is, you know, many of these children have fleeting attention. And so we need to really work on getting them to obtain and use sustained focused attention. Because so much of what you have to learn, you really have to pay attention for a long period of time. And that's just a fleeting glance to see what's going on. You need to pay attention to sequences of activities and how they all fit together. And of course, if we're going to teach all these skills and we're going to help get this individual wanting to interact with others and enjoying interacting with others, then we need to have a very well-developed teaching program because there's so many skills for them to learn, and we got to make sure that we're teaching the skills in the right order and that we're teaching skills that they're using every day. So I've actually written a book with my son. I'll show you the book cover in just a minute. It's called Elements of an Effective, it incorporates elements of the effective program. It's actually called Success on the Spectrum. But what it does is it highlights some very important pieces of information. You know, if we're going to have a good program, we need to make sure that we identify the skills that the child has and does not have, and we need to track the skills development. We also have to then, after we've reviewed all the skills, we've got to prioritize what are we going to work on now? Because what happens is many times people pick the wrong things to work on just because they think the child should do something. They say, well, let's teach them that skill. Well, they may not realize that if they don't prioritize the objectives, which are easier for the child to learn and can use right now, then they may get very frustrated in the process of trying to work with you on learning these skills. And that can often set off disruptive behaviors. So we need to prioritize the objectives correctly. We need to get the learner, the child that is, actively engaged in the learning process. We want them to be motivated to participate. You know, it's not, we don't want to be forcing, we want to get them so that they're enjoying this teaching interactions that are ongoing with them and with their family and with the teachers that are working with them. And to learn skills, you need to practice. And so we need to have many teaching trials throughout the day in all locations, you know, whether it be at home, whether it be, you know, at the clinic, or whether it be out in the community, whether it be with the parents, whether it be with trained individuals, or if it's with caregivers, you know, or helpers that are in the home. Whoever interacts with the child and wherever the child is, there's opportunities for them to learn, but we need to take advantage of that and make sure that we capitalize on that so that we have the most beneficial outcome for the child. And of course, down at the bottom here, last but not least by any means, is we need parents involved with their children. I've worked with thousands of kids over the 50 years that I've been working with children, and I'll tell you that when parents are involved and not just leaving it up to somebody else to get the job done, when parents are involved in teaching their kids skills and working with them and requiring them to use the skills that have been taught to them, those are the kids who have the most beneficial outcomes. So I can't emphasize that enough, and that's why I wanted to do this talk for parents. Parents, you are critical, and what you do or don't do is going to make a big difference in your child's life. And I've talked with many parents, and they say, well, I don't know how to teach, or, you know, they have special needs, and I'm not sure how to do that. I wasn't trained as a teacher. Well, as soon as you're a parent, you are a teacher, whether you know it or not. And it's your job to kind of educate your children, you know, into what's okay, what's not okay, and what the expectations are. So you can't relegate that role. You have to jump right in and do that. And don't be scared. Or if you are, don't worry about it. A lot of parents are, but you get in there, you'll find out. I've had parents come to me after I've worked with them, and they said, you know, I didn't realize it could be so much fun doing the teaching with my own child. I was always told to leave it to somebody else. But I get a lot of joy when I see my child learning from me teaching. So again, I wanted to make sure that's very loud and clear. Okay, so here's a copy of the Success on the Spectrum and at ARN. And again, thank you for ARN for sponsoring this and setting all this up. But they have access to some of these books in their clinic, and you might be able to get one from them to kind of read through it and learn from it. Okay, but now here's where a lot of people get into trouble. You know, we want the kids to learn a lot of critical skills, but sometimes the children or the actually older learners, whatever their age is, engage in some behaviors which make it difficult for people to teach them new skills, disruptive types of behaviors. So when we look at behavior problems, it really can interfere with the learning of new skills. And we need to address those behavior problems, if you will. And I'm going to talk more about them, you know, as we go along today. But one of the things I want to point out to you is that, you know, we've got a lot of different types of behavior problems out there. And it would actually take me a full day to kind of give you a rundown on how to attack a lot of these behavior problems to deal with them. So what I'm going to do is kind of give you some general strategies and get you thinking about what might be going on with your child if you're seeing some of these inappropriate or disruptive or whatever kind of behaviors that you don't like to see. But it can range all the way from very serious self-injurious type of behavior, where kids are hurting themselves, or physically aggressive towards others, or maybe it's tantrums. Maybe it's throwing tantrums when things don't go their way. And that's often a type of problem that we have to deal with. There's a wide variety of disruptive behaviors. They can engage in anything that can annoy people sometimes. Also, sometimes there's repetitive behaviors, which people often call self-stimulatory behaviors. But whatever it is, it's just doing the same thing over and over again. And then there's safety issues, kids climbing where they shouldn't climb, or running away when they're not held onto real tightly. Things like that. Safety issues are important. Water safety issues are important. And then, of course, it could be issues regarding sleep. If we're going to teach a child, we need to have them be alert when we're working with them. And I think that's where, when you start to think about it, if you don't get a good night's sleep, that can certainly hinder your ability to pay attention to what somebody's trying to teach you. So sleep issues can be very important. Also, a number of the kids I've worked with have not been very open to eating a wide variety of foods. They only want a couple of things, and you're not going to be getting proper nourishment unless you have a variety in your diet. So again, we can take a look all the way from the self-injurious and physically aggressive behaviors, the real disruptive ones, down to these other types of behaviors, which may get in the way of them actually learning some some skills as quickly as they could. So one of the things that is very apparent to the professionals in the work in this area of autism spectrum disorders is that many times the children who are exhibiting these behavior problems often lack good communication skills. So skills deficits in the area of communication can often lead to more disruptive behavior. And we found that if we teach a lot of good language and communication skills, oftentimes the problem behaviors start to go down. And so that's why the first part of my talk is going to be about, what do we need to do in terms of teaching them some skills that are going to make it less likely for them to engage in disruptive behaviors, because prevention is certainly worth a whole lot more than trying to stop something that's already gone awry. Okay? So what we need to do is make sure that they develop effective communication skills, language skills, and there's a wide variety of them. I'm going to talk about a couple of them. Maybe in some further trainings that I do, I've been asked to try to do a series of trainings, and this is the first one for parents. So I'm going to be talking more about different topics, teaching specific skills, but I'm going to give you an overview today. What I find is children who can't effectively communicate are still going to find ways to make the world work for them, to get what they want, okay? And that's oftentimes what a lot of these behavior problems are, is to try to make the world work for them in the moment, even though in the long run, it may be preventing them from making as much gains as they could possibly make. And so this often it's the inappropriate behaviors that gets them what they want in a weird sort of a way. It works for them, that's all I can say. And so I've made the point, language skills are critical. It's receptive language. They need to understand what people are saying. So they need to pay attention to what you're saying and the words you're using and how you're putting them together. They need to, if they're going to talk, and I want every child to be able to talk, they need to be able to repeat words and phrases. They need to put words together. They need to control their vocal musculature to produce sounds on a predictable way, and then to start putting these words together. They need to ask for things that they want. Maybe it's just something to eat, or maybe they want to watch a movie, or maybe they want to be pushed on a swing. They need to be able to ask for those simple things. But also, when you start looking at typical child development, not only do typical children ask for things that they want, like popcorn or something, or apples, whatever it is, or push on a swing, but they also ask for information. They want to know, when are we going? Who's coming with us? Is Johnny coming with us? And so forth. So asking for information is a higher level skill that we also need to teach them to do. Not just ask for, simple things like a drink of water or something to eat, but also ultimately to ask for information about what's going on in their world and how they can get access to information that helps them, see what's going on. They also need to talk about the things that they see and hear in their environment. And I think this is really important. And this is basically building a vocabulary. You know, if you're going to learn to communicate with others, you better know some different things that are out there in the world. You need to be able to describe, you know, that, you know, here's some glasses, for instance, and, you know, maybe, you know, here's a bottle of water. They need to be able to label those things that they see. And if they hear, you know, something knocking, oh, they heard knocking, all right. So they need to be able to label those things that are ongoing in their environment. And they also need to talk about their experiences, things that they've experienced, like maybe they went to Sentosa or something over the weekend, or maybe they went out to eat at a restaurant, or they went to grandma and grandpa's house. They need to be able to talk about those experiences. They need to also be able to talk about things that they know. So if we're having a conversation, for instance, like, you know, what you might get at a hawker center, for instance, can they tell you that you might be able to get some different type of food items that they like there? They need to be able to talk about those things. Okay. Now, the hard part is, as I said, when we're developing these plans, you know, we need to teach the skills at the right time. We need to know what to teach when. And that's where we often get into difficulty because, like I say, sometimes people pick the wrong objective. So that's why at ARN, the staff there are using the Ablezr, which I developed, it's called Assessment of Basic Language and Learning Skills Revised, and the AFLS, the Assessment of Functional Living Skills, to track the children's skills. And because of the way the items are put together in the assessment, it kind of guides the process of what goals are you going to pick next. And I've been working with the staff now for about 15, 16 years and been training the supervisors in terms of, you know, how do you take a look at the skills the child has across the board and then focus in on some very critical skills that will work for him right now. You know, we want to teach him something that he can use today, not something he's going to need a year from now, but we want something that he can use today, because if we're teaching him skills that he can use today, he'll have the opportunity to use it every day. And if he does, he's not likely to forget it, as instead of if you teach him something that he really doesn't see very much of or know anything about, and he's never going to see it for another year or so, he's probably going to forget it, like all of us would. So we want to teach them skills that they can use today, that are going to make their life better and be maintained by the interactions that they have with the others around them. And so here's a picture of the Ablezr protocol, Assessment of Basic Language and Learning Skills Revised. And this is kind of the first page of the grid. There's actually 25 different skill areas. I've got, 8, 9 of them here, I guess, on the front page. And you take a look at things like cooperation and reinforcer effectiveness, visual performance, receptive language skills, imitation skills, vocal imitation, requesting, labeling, introverbals, or talking about things in their absence, and spontaneous vocalizations. And each of these lines going across represents a different skill. So for instance, in labeling, there's 47 different skills. And in imitation, there's 27 different skills. In receptive language, there's 57 skills. So what we do then is the staff, and you should know this too, you should be paying attention to this too, so you know what they're looking for and what your child's doing. And you fill in the grids. And then because these are put in order, the skills are put in order from simpler to more complex. So the lower ones down here are much easier to learn than the ones up here, for instance. What we want to do is start picking objectives that are appropriate for them to work on in this certain area to extend their labeling skills, for instance, and their requesting skills, and even their imitation skills. So we can focus in on, pick some skills, teach, and then come back at another point in time. And then you fill in where the child's made progress. So you see, first we have the yellow, and then we put in the greens to say this is where the progress was made for this child, okay? And so anyhow, then we keep this process going. We then have some new objectives. We keep extending up and filling in some of these holes. And then we teach, and then we come back again and we fill it in. We pick some new targets. And every time we fill it in, it suggests maybe some shifts in emphasis on which skills are more important at this particular moment. And then we keep this process going until hopefully the chart is all filled in. And I want to tell you, since you haven't had an opportunity to talk with you much about this, the Ablezr is based on taking a look at what are the skills that a typical 5-year-old child going to kindergarten has in their skill sets when they walk into kindergarten when they turn 5. And what you'll see, this is an example right now of a typical 4-year-old boy at 4 years of age and what his skills look like. So actually many of the children, by the time they're 4, have pretty much filled up the ABLES, but by 5, the Ablezr is filled up for typically developing children, okay? And that's what we're shooting for. You know, we're hoping, again, that if we do this early intensive behavioral intervention, we use the right teaching method, the ABAVB, then we're hoping that what's going to happen is they will make it to be able to make it into kindergarten. Okay, that's our goal. And even if they don't, though, they're still much better off and going to require a lot less assistance for the rest of their life if we can get their skills being developed quicker. Okay. So I said one of the other aspects that's really important is to ensure the motivation of the child. And this is where some of the challenge comes in. We got to get them participating with us. We want them to want to be with us. We want them to be enjoying the learning process. So it's up to us to make that happen. And so, you know, a good therapist, a parent who's learning to teach, you know, we want to make this fun for the child. So we want to be enthusiastic about it. We need to make sure we deliver reinforcers at an appropriate rate. And I'm going to talk more about what a reinforcer is because many people don't really understand that very well. And when we're running sessions with them or working, we don't want to keep pushing until they start failing and not doing well. We got to stop while they're ahead because nobody wants to leave on a bad note. And you certainly don't want the child to do that. So again, we need to make sure if we get a couple of good trials in and the child's doing really well, you know, our tendency is to keep pushing, but that can oftentimes backfire on us that, you know, the child learns, oh, here they come again, and now they're going to make it until I'm not happy, and then they'll stop. So I can start acting unhappy earlier, and maybe they'll stop sooner, and that's exactly what we don't want. So don't push too far, stop while you're ahead so that they leave on a positive note and you feel good about it too. So some of the aspects of teaching in the book, Success on the Spectrum, I lay out a whole chapter about behavioral teaching methodology, which would be extremely helpful for you to review. But, you know, some of the basics, when you go to interact with the child, you're going to give them some instructions. You got to present a clear instruction when they're paying attention to you. You know, have you ever had somebody ask you to do something and you really weren't paying attention? It's like, what? You know, sometimes that happens in life. So you've got to make sure you get their attention before you ask them to do something. And if they do it and they participate with you, and maybe they give a really good approximation, maybe they didn't get it exactly right, but they made a good effort and it was much closer than it's been in the past, you want to make sure that they get reinforced for that. And when I talk about reinforcement, I'm going to talk about it in just a second here. It's a very technical thing, but think of it as a payoff that's meaningful to the child, okay? But in reality, what it is something that makes the behavior occur more often in the future. In other words, it has a specific effect on the behavior of increasing it. So one of the things you have to learn when you're teaching, though, is even though we want them to be independent in doing everything, the idea, though, is that if they can't do a skill, then we need to teach it to them. Sometimes we need to help them, and we call this prompting. And prompting can be telling them what to do. Can be pointing to show them, to get them to pay attention to something. It can get them to watch us and see what we're doing, imitate us so that they do what we're doing and so forth. So there's many different types of prompts described in that book too. But again, you need to know how to prompt and how to fade the prompt so that they don't become dependent upon the prompt. You use the prompt to kind of help them learn the skill, but as soon as they don't need that prompt, you need to get rid of it right away, okay? So we can use prompts. They're it's a very, very powerful technology if done correctly. Now, there's many, many different critical language and learner skills that a child needs to be able to, you know, learn from their everyday interactions with others. And that's really what our goal is. We don't have time to teach every child every skill they need to learn, but we need to teach them to be good learners. We need to teach them to pay attention to what's going on around them, to what they're hearing, what they're seeing. And we want to make sure that if they have those skills and they can imitate what they see, whether it be vocally or rhetorically, and they can understand what people are saying, then they're going to do pretty well. So what are some of those critical learner skills? Well, one is receptive language. They need to be able to follow directions. And sometimes we have to start out with some simple things like clap your hands, have them do this, or arms up, and let them do their arms up, or turn around. Simple things, but it builds onto more complex things. So for instance, oh, can you go get daddy's shoes? They're under the bed, or they're outside the door. Okay, so that you can tell them where to go. Or maybe you can say, oh, can you go get the juice out of the refrigerator? More simple to more complex ones. They also need to be able to identify things when you talk about them. So something that you drink, for instance, receptive by functions, if you will. What's something you drink or something you cut with? Do they know that we're talking about, juice or water or cutting, talking about scissors or knives and so forth? Can you give me something with a feature, for instance? So you'd say, what's something that has wings? And it could be a bird, it could be an airplane, and so on. Or something from a certain type of class. Can you name some animals? Can you name some farm animals and so forth? Okay, things like that. They gotta learn all those types of skills, right? Here's an example of one of the little girls at ARN working on what's called receptive by function feature or class. The teacher is going to ask her some questions and have the little girl respond.
Carla, can you give me something you can sleep on? Very nice. What is that?
Pillow.
Pillow. Very good. How about something you can ride on? And that is?
Bicycle.
How many wheels does the bicycle have? 2. Very good. And can you touch an animal?
See, she knows the words in class of animals.
Very good. And what does the dog say? Yes, very nice. How about, can you give me something you can wear?
Something you wear.
Okay.
Okay.
Very nice. This is a
Socks.
socks. Okay, very good. And socks goes with
Shoes.
shoes.
She actually gave 2 good answers on that one. Socks goes with, and she had feet, shoes. So she threw out the feet first there. But yeah, she knows that socks go on your feet, they go with shoes and so forth, all right? So this is a good teaching method. But you see the excitement of the teacher too. She's making it fun, she's encouraging her, but she's also extending it out again. So, when she talked about the bicycle, something you ride on, and she said bike, whatever. So then she said, oh, and how many wheels is that? So she said 2. So she's just mixing up the things that she's asking her to do. So that's a very good little demonstration of those types of skills. Those are receptive language skills. It's really important. And then we need to teach motor imitation. Many times I'll see parents or teachers showing a child what to do, and the child has never really learned to pay attention to do what the other person is doing. So if you're showing them what to do, but they're not paying attention to you and they can't do what you're doing, then your prompts that you're using to try to teach them are going to be ineffective. And it turns out that if there's one skill set besides just language, like that is really, really critical for a child, that's motor imitation. They need to pay attention. Because remember I said we need sustained focused attention. Well, you can get a lot of sustained focused attention by presenting them with trials of getting them to imitate your actions. Because if you do something like, they've got to stay with you. They've got to watch you and either do it with you or do it following you. Those are 2 different ways of doing imitation skills. They need to be able to do both. But those are gross motor. But how about fine motor skills too? Can they do those? How about speed of actions? It's different to do this than it is to do this. Although they're both kind of clapping the hands, if I'm doing like this and I want you to do that and you're doing this, that's not the same. If I'm doing this and you're doing like this, that's not the same. So they need to be able to do sequences of actions, like I demonstrated just a few minutes ago, speed of actions. They also need to be able to do head and mouth actions, different ones and so forth. Okay, so anyhow, we can do all types of imitative, but imitative skills are really, really critical, and every child needs to develop them very thoroughly. Vocal imitation, a lot of kids have difficulty controlling their vocal musculature to talk. And how are we going to get them to talk? if they can't control their vocal musculature to produce sounds in a certain type of order that we call making words or phrases. And so we need to have them practicing that. That's very, very important. And I'll tell you this too, that oftentimes, if you're having difficulty getting a child to vocally imitate, if you start by working on them motorically imitating, getting you watch and do what you do, that teaches them that concept of, oh, I'm supposed to watch and do what he does. And if I do that, it pays off for me because they get rewarded or reinforced for engaging in such behavior. But also, it teaches that relationship. So then we switch it from motor actions to vocal actions, say ah, say ee, say mommy. You know, they also learn that, oh, I'm supposed to be doing these things, which are also matching what the other person's doing. But it's not just words and phrases. It's also, can they match the volume of what you're saying? Are they talking very loud? Are they talking very soft? Are they speaking fast? Are they speaking very slow? High tone or low tone? High tone. You know, can they mix it up like that? Can they match? And oftentimes that's developed through teaching them to sing songs with others. This is a little boy, also from one of the ARN offices I worked with a number of years ago, trying to get him to vocally imitate. And I want you to show you how I'm making it fun for him. He likes things that fall down. So we had some bubbles that I could blow for him. He used to like to watch the bubbles float down. But you see, I'm not cornering him. He's coming to me because I've got something he wants, which is the bubbles, okay? So again, you always start out when you're gonna start working with a child, make sure you got something that they wanna work for. Here we go.
Watch. One more time, ready?
Nice. And so I blow some bubbles for him and we pop them. Take some trial, practice.
There you go.
So he did well, and I blow some more bubbles for him, okay? You get the idea though, it takes practice. And where can you do this practice? You can do this anywhere. You can do it when you're riding the car. You can do this, you know, when you're downstairs in the play area of your building. You can do it in your apartment. You can do it walking down the street. Anyhow, when it comes to specific skills, expressive language skills, we talked about receptive, but expressive skills, there's many. There's the vocal skills you have, we call a coax or vocal imitation. And we got the requests, or what we call mands in a technical term. And what this is teaching them to ask for things that they want. And when you think about it, language, when you can ask for things you want and you get it, it's very, very powerful. It teaches you the lesson that if you want to get something, you can do something that people will understand that will allow you to get what you want. Very, very powerful. Talk about reinforcement. That's awesome, built into the language itself, that shows them that language pays off for them. Using language, they can get some things that they want. Maybe not all the time, but much of the time when they want it. So it gives them some control over their environment. And I'll tell you, a lot of kids, when they can't ask for things that they want, they just start acting upset, and then the parent tries to figure out what it is they want, and then they give it to them. Well, now what they've done is when the child's acting with disruptive behaviors, they reward it or reinforce it, we would say, with getting what they wanted. And that's exactly what you don't want, because you don't want to strengthen the inappropriate behavior. In fact, you want to teach them some other way of getting access to things that they want. Even if they can't vocally imitate, you know, if you can teach them to ask for something to eat using some sign language, you know, when they're hungry, or maybe they want to watch a movie, you can teach them to sign for a movie that they can ask to see a movie, and then you can let them choose the one they want and they can watch it. Very, very powerful. So, you know, we start off by teaching them to ask for things that they want, items and activities. Maybe they want to go to the slide, or maybe they want to go to the swimming pool, or maybe they want to be pushed on the swing, or maybe they want to listen to music. And, you know, so we can teach them something to say and or some sign language to get access to things that they want. Labeling, okay, they need a vocabulary. And this is where we need to start taking, well, what are we going to teach them? And I think this is what's really important. You know, as I go to learn, I'm learning a new language myself. And when I go to do it, I'm looking at, well, what are the things that I see around me, and can I label those things? And if I can't, then I got to look them up and I got to study it until I've learned the names of those items. And so what I've told many parents to start doing, you know, is to take a look at the things around you in your home. You know, what are some of the things in each of the rooms of the home? So maybe you go into the living room and say, what are the 5 most obvious things there? And do they know that this is a TV, for instance? Okay, or this is a couch, this is a window. You go into the kitchen, you got a refrigerator, you got a stove. Go into the bedroom, you got beds, you know, pillows, blankets, and so forth. So if you go to each of the rooms of the house and pick 5 items, now you've got about 25 different targets to make sure you can kind of start making sure that they know them. And of course, I've made a 220 nouns list that's available. The staff at ARN have it, and you can go through it. It kind of categorizes groups by 4 different groupings. Maybe you teach these first grouping first, see if they're appropriate for the child. And then if not, you kind of consider some of the ones in the second, third, and fourth categories. But you start doing it in a logical order. You know, so for instance, if you just happen to have a dog in your house or something, you have a pet dog, well, they should learn to be able to label that's a dog, you know. That's probably more important than trying to teach them something that they really don't see every day, like a zebra, okay, or a giraffe. Well, they need to know those too. Well, yes, but how often are they going to see a giraffe and zebra? Probably not all that often, unless you go to the zoo every day. So once again, you start taking a look at logical ways of approaching developing that vocabulary. What are they going to need to know? What's around them? What are other people talking about in front of them? Those are the words you want to start teaching them. Now, what's going on here? This is in my clinic. I had a little kid come in, and this was his helper who worked with the family. And so one of the things we did was we said, well, there's so many different ways to teach him to talk about things. And so they were going to make some cookies. They call them biscuits from where he's from. But the bottom line is that while we're doing this activity, he's going to end up getting access to having some cookies as a result of it. But also, the therapist here is going to be working with him, the helper, to learn different ways of talking about what they're doing. I'll just show you a few seconds of this here.
Very nice.
Yeah, she's using the word cutting, cutting, cutting. But even more important, not just telling him, but asking him what he's doing. He says cutting. We want him to be doing the talking. A lot of times when people are trying to increase the vocabulary of a child, they're doing all the talking. The one who really has to do the talking is the kid, because they're the ones who have to ultimately come up with that word later on when they need it. So cutting is a good thing. Learning about scissors. Cutting with scissors. Scissors are something you cutting. Scissors are for cutting.
Big whiteboard.
Now we got a receptive language skill here.
Very nice.
Notice she praises a lot. What are you doing? What am I doing? Pouring. So you see, you can have some fun activities. And again, you don't need to leave it all to the helpers too, parents. You know, helpers can do, if the helpers are there, they can be good teachers too. Yes, use them, but you need to do these kind of things too. If you want to have your child do really, really well, it's really important to be in there too. So you know what the child's capable of doing, not just leaving it to others. But let me move on here. Introverbals are talking about things in their absence, talking about experiences. You know, if the child can ask for some items, has been labeling some items and receptively knows the names of some items, yeah, then maybe you can start teaching them some things like, what's your name? Or what's your daddy's name, your mommy's name, and so forth. How old are you? Simple ones that don't change. And then you stay the same answer most of the time, except for your age, and only lasts for a year. Then you got to teach them the new one. But later on, what did you do at grandma's house? Or who did you see when we went downstairs to the playground and so forth? Being able to talk about those things. And I already talked about the aspects of, you got to talk about sequences of things. Tell me how you wash your hands. Tell me about things that certain functions feature or classes, and just answer a variety of questions. Who sat next to you at lunch today, for instance? In fact, here we go. Here's a child. He's sitting down next to another child. So you take the view and you ask, well, what does Bobby have for lunch today? Get him to pay attention to the other kids. If we want to interact with other kids, they've got to start paying attention to them. So maybe you can take a look at Bobby and say, well, he looks like he's got some ham, he's got some raisins, and he's also got some applesauce, okay? So you can start to get him to label those things while the activity is going on. And guess what? After the activity is over with, then let's talk about lunch, okay? We can talk about it after lunch is done. So, where did you eat lunch today? Well, this looked like they ate it out on the porch. When he went out there, and he was eating lunch at the porch, and anybody tell him it's the porch and get him to say it's the porch where we're eating, okay? Who sat next to you at lunch? Again, if we were paying attention to the boy next to us, then we're going to be able to do that, right? What did Michael have for lunch today? What did he eat? Also, doesn't necessarily have to be a question all the time. It says, just tell me about Michael's lunchbox. But now, if he hadn't paid attention to it and hadn't talked about it when he was having lunch, with Michael, he probably wouldn't have even known anything about it. But if you make it a topic of conversation while you're eating, this is part of the natural course of having lunch, then you've got something you can teach them to talk about, after the experience is over. Here are some examples.
Look at, what's your name?
Carla.
And how old are you?
4.
Very nice. Carla, can you tell me 2 things you can eat?
I wanna eat chicken raw.
Chicken,
Name
right?
2 things you can eat. You can eat. And? Very nice. Can you tell me 2 things you can ride on?
A bicycle, a horse.
Very nice.
Okay, pretty nice. Okay, so now she knows some of the classifications of things, the functions of things. You can see that she also knows some information about herself, which is exactly what we're talking about. We've got to keep building these skills. Build, build, build. And now here's an example too of just everyday activities at home. Now, many of you might have helpers that take care of all the laundry for your family, but you know what? They can also have the child help out with this too. Getting them to know where the different clothing items go and where to get them. And how about getting dressed? We want them to be independent. The nanny can always kind of help get them looking nice and get them all cleaned up and have everything put away. But we really want this child to be more independent. We want them to be able to take care of themselves if a nanny isn't there. So, and also to learn about, how you store things and so forth. And this little clip is kind of fun because the mother is having to put away his laundry that's been cleaned. But now they're also going to have some nice little social interaction about learning about things about clothing that's no longer very useful. Just let it play.
Ready? Catch. Catch. What?
See, she's making it a fun activity. It's not just put your socks away.
Good job. Put them in. Uh-oh. Gotta push down your soccer babies. Ooh, one more time.
So you have to learn how to get them all fit in there too. That's another skill. Many different functional skills in life.
What is that?
Yeah.
What is it?
Underwear.
Underwear.
He made a mistake. The pants, it's underpants.
Another one. Put it
Underwear.
in. There you go.
And see, he likes these activities.
It go on a hanger.
This shirt go on a hanger?
Rip with socks.
You got a rip in your sock. Yeah, take that off. Let's put this one on.
No, you would take a sock.
Take the sock off. Here,
So
put this
no-
one on.
Sock get dirty.
No, sock is broken. It's got a hole. What's it got?
Oh.
Look at it. It's got a hole.
If it's
It's ripped.
stop whipped,
It's ripped.
we sock need to fix it.
We Don't fix them. We throw them out when they rip.
In the garden.
Go throw these out in the garbage in mommy's bathroom.
See, so he's learning about what happens to clothing as they become unusable. You know, you don't fix socks anymore. We're not all that poor these days. But the idea here is that she's teaching him more vocabulary too. It's ripped, it's got a hole. Because he was saying it's dirty. Well, it's not dirty. It's actually just ripped. It's got a tear in it. So she's teaching him words that he can then use, you know, going forward. And you notice he was repeating the words that she was giving to him to use. So good teaching, Mom. All right, now we're going to talk about the behavior problems, okay? Now that we've talked about a lot of things we need to teach them, again, to try to prevent a lot of inappropriate types of behavior. So let's get into these behaviors a little bit. And when we're talking about good and bad behavior or desired or undesired, it doesn't really matter how you kind of talk about them. You have to realize that all behavior, whether it's good, bad, desired, undesired, is a function of its history of interactions with others, okay? And this is the important part. If it's been working for a child, it's going to keep on working, then you're going to get the same behavior, whether it's a good behavior or whether it's an inappropriate or undesired type of behavior. So if we've got an undesired behavior, we need to try to change that behavior. So we need to change the history of interactions around that behavior and other behaviors that we want to replace the undesired behavior. And that's really the key, is looking at, okay, you don't like this, but what are we going to be trying to do instead, okay? So behavior change, it changes over time. It doesn't happen instantaneously usually, okay? So what we've got to do is change the interaction. So if they've had 100 or so interactions where an inappropriate behavior has been working, we're not going to change that behavior in 1 or 2 interactions when it doesn't work, okay? It's really going to take a number of interactions to kind of override the previous history and create a new history going forward. And that's why when you have a behavior plan, you really want to make sure that everybody's on board and consistent with what to do with the child when they act in a certain type of way, okay? So we can increase behaviors or we can decrease behaviors. But the question often is, you know, from parents and teachers is, why is he doing this, okay? Well, I always say it's because it's working for him. This is an inappropriate behavior we're talking about, okay? Well, it's working for him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be doing it. He's learned that the behavior has the desired results that he wants. And when we start to analyze the behavior and say, well, what is it about this, you know, outcome for him that makes it work? Well, we need to take a look at the motivation behind the behavior, okay? And what we're looking at is 3 different pieces. One of the things we call our antecedent events, or what was happening at the time the behavior occurs, okay? So like, let's say you've got a kid that starts throwing tantrums in the store. Well, what was happening right before he threw the tantrum? You were walking through the chips or the candy aisle. And so then what's the behavior? Well, he starts reaching for or grabbing it and starts to throw a fit because you're not going to get it for him. And then you end up giving him the chips or the candy. And then he finds out, oh, that worked. So next time he goes into a store and sees something he wants, you can do the same thing. It's probably going to work unless you do something different, okay? So consequences, though, this is the most important part. Looking at the consequences for the behavior, or you might say the payoffs. You know, we continue to do good things that reliably have a good immediate consequence. We call this reinforcement. A little more technical, and I'll get into that in a few seconds here, but if things are paying off for us, we keep doing them. If things aren't paying off for us, we don't keep doing it, okay? However, one problem we have here is that when you have an occasional good outcome, not all the time, but it comes often enough that it's worth trying every time, that keeps the behavior strong. And that's why when you go to change behavior, you got to make sure that once you've decided what you're going to do, you got to make sure everybody's on board and being consistent with the child, because one give in to a child for a behavior that you didn't want to see, guess what? You might strengthen that behavior. So now he knows, okay, it's going to pay off. I just don't know when. And I don't know how hard I have to act or how bad I have to be essentially to get the payoff. So how do I get my child to do what I want him to do? Okay, we got to teach him that going along with us pays off, okay? Question is, why should he do what you want him to do? You know, what's the motivation behind it? What's the payoff for listening to you, doing what you ask him to do? Because if there isn't a payoff for it, he's probably not going to do it. And then you're going to be fighting with him, and that's not a good thing. So let's talk about this concept reinforcement a little more detail. It's a technical term, okay? It's three parts. It's an environmental change. Something happens following a behavior that results in an increased probability that the behavior will occur again in the future under similar circumstances, okay? That's it. If the behavior does not increase, it is not reinforcement, no matter what you think of what it should be doing. You know, because sometimes people say, well, you know, he really likes this movie, so after he does this, I'm going to let him watch some of the movie. Well, now you're not seeing a change in his behavior. He's not doing what you want him to do more often. Then you say, well, the movie is no longer serving as a reinforcer. It may have in the past, but it isn't now. Other people say, well, I'm praising him all the time. I'm saying what a good job he's doing. Okay, tell him that. It's not working. That means the praise is not reinforcement. Praise would be a reinforcement only if it increases the behavior. So what we're really looking for, this is a functional definition of a payoff, if you will, okay? And this is where we got to use this word reinforcement very carefully, because if it's not changing the behavior, making it increase, it's not reinforcement, okay? So we got to make sure when we're talking, we're all talking about the same thing. There's different types of reinforcers. Of course, there's what we call primary or unlearned, and those are things that, you know, keep us alive, basically. Food and water, appropriate type of climate. You know, if you're on the equator, you want to have it be cool. You know, if you're in a freezing area, you want to make sure that you're in reasonable temperature, maybe 23 degrees or something like that Celsius, to have you, you know, keep your body working right, you know, not overheating, freezing, or not freezing to death, okay? And then almost everything else is learned, you know, like certain type of play activities. Even money is a condition reinforcer. You know, when you're born, money doesn't keep you alive, except for somebody who has it, who buys things for you. But for you, money has of no value whatsoever until you learn that money can actually be exchanged to get you things that you want. But almost all other things besides things that keep you alive, like food, water, physical warmth, and so forth, are learned reinforcers. And then there's a third type here we call automatic reinforcers, which are things that happen as a result of your own actions. So for instance, if I really like making a noise, and I like the way it feels, I like the way it sounds to myself, that can actually be reinforcing itself. The child's own behavior sometimes can produce its own reinforcement because they like the sensations of what they're getting when they're acting in a certain way. Those are a little harder to compete with. We do have strategies for that. Okay. Now, when you start to look at a behavior problem, though, you have to realize behavior is logical. You got to look at it from a logical perspective, okay? You need to identify the reason why the inappropriate behavior is working. And also, I'll warn you here that if you've got some real serious behavior that's, you know, hurting others or causing major disruption, or they're hurting themselves, you probably need to have more of a professional help to work with you on how to come up with a behavior plan. I'm just giving you some general strategies of how to approach behavior in general. But if you've got a real serious problem, give to a professional, okay, who knows how to work on changing behavior. But basically, the functions of behavior, okay, the payoffs, if you will, are a few. One is usually obtaining some specific type of reinforcement. Sometimes it's just getting attention from somebody. You know, kids do stuff just to get you to react to them. Other times they're getting reinforcers, which are specific things that they enjoy. Like I say, being able to sit down and read a book with you, or maybe jumping on a trampoline, or maybe getting something to eat from you, preferred item, or even just a regular food item. There's another function of behavior besides just getting positive reinforcers, but that is escaping from negative events. If you're in a situation that you don't like, you want to get out of it. And see, sometimes when the teaching sessions aren't run correctly, if it's not very reinforcing for the child, they're not getting enough payoffs for doing it, sometimes they don't want to participate with you anymore. It's too hard. Maybe you're trying to teach the wrong skill, or maybe you're too stingy, if you will, with delivering reinforcers for the good behaviors. And hence, you know, the child learns, I don't want to be with you. I don't want to work with you. And that's not what we want. We want the children to run to us, not from us. So we need to make sure our teaching methods are really solid and positive in the way they interact with us, okay? And maybe then certain type of events or tasks that they just don't want to participate in. And they're going to give you some disruptive behavior to get out of there. And that oftentimes will work, because I can't take him here because he starts acting up. Well, if you can't take him to a store because he acts up and goes into the store, well, then you need to teach him about how to go into stores and have it be a positive experience, not necessarily go shopping for your whole shopping, but just get him in the store, get him out of the store, and have some reinforcement for remaining calm and staying with you and not acting up in the store, doing, just following you through quickly. And then maybe you extend it out to do different activities. I could talk forever about how to break that down for you, but the idea, the second function, first one is obtaining something that they really, really want from you, whether it be attention or items. The second function is escape or avoidance. If I start acting like this, you'll leave me alone, and I'd much rather be by myself than have to work for you, because it's not very reinforcing for them, okay? And then, of course, the third one is, that I talked about before, is the automatic reinforcement, self-produced reinforcement. Their own actions sort of produce stimuli or changes that reinforce their own actions, which we call reinforcement. Now, the main solution to problems has to do with identifying appropriate behaviors to reinforce that are incompatible with the undesired behavior. Okay, this is the key. If you see something you don't like, you got to find something that you would rather have them do instead of what you don't like them doing. Okay, you also need to make sure that the undesired behaviors are not getting reinforced. They're not getting a payoff that's keeping them going. Okay, and so you need to teach them new skills for more options and activities, and you need to get them out there coming in contact with a greater variety of potential reinforcers. It's easy to see the problem behavior. I don't like it when he pulls me. I don't like when he yells. Okay, yeah. But what would you like to see him do instead of what you don't like? And that's where it gets a little tricky. So for instance, grabbing items in the store. You don't like that? Good. So what do you want him to do? Keep his hands to himself. Great. You don't like him whining? What do you want him to do? Being quiet or just talking with a nice tone of voice? When you're walking with him, he's pulling on you. I don't like him pulling on me. Well, what do you want? Well, I don't want him to pull. That's not good enough. You got to say, what do I want him to walk nicely beside me, okay, staying next to me. Banging his toys together. You don't like that? Good. So what do you want him to do with the toys? Play with them in a nicer way, a more appropriate type of way. So identify what you want to see. It's easy to say what you don't want. It's much harder for people to identify what they do want, because the key here is once you've identified what you want, you're going to see that there are instances where the child's engaging in the behaviors that you want to see more of. And of course, if that's occurring, what do you need to do? You need to reinforce that behavior. Don't reinforce the child, you're reinforcing the behavior, okay? So this is really a key issue here. You've got to identify what you want to see so that you start watching for it. Because I'll see many parents will say, their kids are playing very nicely, and I'll say, well, leave them alone, because if I do, then they're going to start acting out again. So no, if they're playing nicely, you need to go up to them and reinforce that behavior. Maybe go start playing with them a little bit, but make it more fun than what they're having on their own by themselves, okay? Because you want them to do that. Even if it does cause a little disruption, they stop playing after a little while. Because the next thing you know, they're going to be doing what you don't want, and then you're going to be trying to stop a behavior when you're not even increasing the behavior that you do want to see. So again, find what you want, make sure you reinforce it. So for instance, you're walking through the store and say something like, I like the way you're keeping your hands to yourself. I like the way you're walking beside me. I like the way you're being so quiet if you've got a kid that makes a whole lot of noise. I like the way you're walking nicely beside me. You can use specific praise. Tell them what you like. But they start hearing these words so that they know where the reinforcement's coming, and then pair up those words with other reinforcers. So maybe if you've got some little snack item that they want and they're walking nicely beside you, say, oh, I like the way you're walking so nicely beside you. Here, have a chip. Give them a little potato chip or something healthy, a raisin, whatever it is. Or things like when you see what they're, oh, I like the way you're playing so nicely with the truck. Maybe I'll come and we'll play together. So again, you become part of the reinforcement too. So how do you increase desired behaviors? You got to reinforce the good behaviors. Identify what you want to see, reinforce it. Catch them being good should be a major part of your discussion. Keep demands, if you're going to ask them to do something, simple ones to get them to comply with you. You're trying to get a child to go along with you when you ask them to do things. And if you've got a child who's pretty much non-compliant. They don't follow directions very well from him. Start with simple ones that you know they understand and can follow, and show them that when they do what you ask them to do, it pays off for them. So that as you get into more and more difficult requests for them to do certain types of actions, that they've already got a history now of saying, yeah, if I do this for mommy or daddy, then good things are going to happen. The other part is don't allow escape behavior to get reinforced. And I think this is where, again, a lot of parents succumb to this because they just don't want to hear their kid making noise. We call, tantruming or wailing, whatever. They don't like it. So how do you make it stop? Well, you give them what they want, and then you reinforce their inappropriate behavior, and you're reinforced for doing it because now that sound you didn't want to hear is gone. So you're reinforced for doing the wrong thing, and they're reinforced for doing the wrong thing, and you're both going to suffer in the long run. So don't allow escape behavior to get reinforced, and don't let them get bored. One of the other things that causes a lot of behavior problems is kids are just left by themselves for too long, and then all of a sudden they start acting out, and then what happens? Oh, well, come on, let's go over here and do something fun. Well, gee whiz, now you're giving them a reinforcer for starting to act up because they had nothing better to do. But if you kept them busy and engaged a little bit, then they wouldn't have had to do that, okay? And then they wouldn't get reinforced for undesirable behavior. And then, of course, you want to think like the child. Why should I do something for you when I can get my own reinforcers, okay? And like I say, kids oftentimes will entertain themselves in weird kind of ways. They might take a mirror and look at themselves. We call that stimming or something, stimming, repetitive behaviors. But when you look at it, they can get access to a lot of reinforcers. So if you want them to do something for you, you've got to make their world better. You got to have something that makes it better for them than what they can get right now on their own for free without you. Okay, so you always have to think in terms of reinforcers. I've got another book out called Learning to Motivate, Motivating to Learn, again, with my son, Scott, who's also a behavior analyst. And it goes through a lot of examples about reinforcers. It's great for that, okay? You got to get them cooperating. You got to get them to go along with it. They need to learn that good things happen when they do what we ask them to do. And that's what's so critical. We also talked about this in technical, we call it instructional control. If we give them an instruction, will they follow it, basically? You need to make sure you're fun with the kid, though. I mean, this is where kids often learn that adults are not so much fun because they stop them from doing things that they like doing, and they make them do things that they don't like to do. So you always want to make sure you're pairing your interactions with the child, associate yourself, your words of reinforcement with actual reinforcement. And if you're pairing, if you're just having fun with them, if you don't have a good interaction relationship with them, just start by playing with them a little bit and not asking them to do much, just narrating. So if you got a train and they're playing with the train, rather than turning it into work, saying, what does the train say? Or push the train around the track, you say, ooh, there's the train. Ooh, ooh. So you start narrating, you start making sound, ding, 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 you're at the crossing. You're talking, but you're not asking them to do things right away. Keep it fun with the interaction. And later on, you can start sneaking something. You're going to establish praise as a reinforcer, or praise is not effective as a reinforcer. When you go to give them something they want, they ask for some water. They, oh, you want something to drink? And they go, drink, or they do the sign for drink. Oh, good, drink, yeah, drink. So you smile, you change your tone of voice before you deliver the actual reinforcer so that they're paying attention to you. Because if they go drink, or they say drink, and you give it to them and say, that was nice asking. Well, they're not listening to you because they're already drinking the water and you're long gone. Developing instructional control. Don't give an instruction unless you plan on following through. Don't ask if they want to do something. Tell them what you want them to do. Clap your hands. Oh, can you clap your hands? Not really. I don't want to. Be physically close to them at eye level when you're giving an instruction. Okay. And present instruction when you know the child is likely to attend to you. When you've got something that they want, okay, now you've got to, oh, can you do this? And then they do it, and boom, you give them some water, juice, whatever, okay? When you're developing instructional control, make sure the child's looking at you or the materials when you present the instruction. If he's not looking or paying attention to you, you don't give the instruction. Start with easy tasks and just get more compliance going along following instructions from you under the belt before you get into more difficult ones. And always, always, always deliver reinforcer immediately after the child's what you've asked them to do. Reinforce the behavior. Have many practice sessions throughout the day in every room of the house, down at the playground, walking to the park. Don't overwhelm them with excessive instructions, but just keep giving instructions throughout the day. Mix them up. Give a few. Don't give some for a while. Give another couple, so forth. Remember, we want the kids to run to us, not from us. If they're running from us, we got some problems. Okay, how are we going to get them to socially interact with us if they don't like us? It's not going to work. Okay, we need to make it better for them when we're around them than what they have on their own for free. But the reality is, I often say, is that we do need to interact with children in ways that they don't want to. They're children. We're their caregivers. We're their teachers. We got to make sure that they do certain things. Like you got to go to bed, you got to wear your seatbelt, and so on. So you're going to stop them from any unsafe behaviors, near something where they might get hurt, something that's sharp or flames, or where you're out in a busy street. You need to make sure that they don't get hit by a car. And also, they need to do necessary tasks whether they want to or not. They need to sit in the car with their seatbelt on. They need to get dressed, take a bath, they need to go to bed, and so forth. So you're going to be putting them in positions where you're going to have to be the parent. Okay, you've got to get them to do it, and that's okay. That's part of life. So it's not all rosy the way I was describing before about all this positive. No, sometimes you just got to do it. And some things are negotiable and other things are not. Okay, you are not going to walk by yourself on a busy street with cars zooming by. What if I don't feel it's safe, right? Who's the boss? Okay, once you pick something that's reasonable, don't back down from them. Just make sure those expectations you have are reasonable. If you don't know, check with the staff at ARN. I'm going to show you just a couple videos before we end up here. But this is of a little girl who came to my clinic. The woman here in the black sweater is the mother. And this is when the little girl first came to my clinic. She did not want people to have her do anything. So when it came time to clean up, after she'd been playing with stuff, she started throwing a fit. Okay, and you'll hear it. So get ready. It's a little noisy. And this is just because she was asked to help clean up. They kept following through. Also, when she went to go leave, this is the therapist working with her. The therapist is going to show her that she gets her juice when she does what the therapist wants her to do. So she's going to keep telling her what to do until she does it, and then she gets the reinforcer of the juice.
What do you want?
See, so as soon as she did what she was supposed to, she gets the juice. All right. Now this is after several weeks of being in the clinic and making sure that we followed through with making her put her stuff away and not allowing her to take home things that she wanted to take home that she couldn't take home. Okay? So here's a couple weeks later, cleanup time.
Good girl. And maybe clean up this stuff now. Very nice.
Good job, boy.
Mhm.
Good girl. Can you put them there? Good girl. Can you put it away? Can you put it away?
Does she know where it goes?
This way, sweetie. This way.
Wow, what a good helper. More than she does.
So a couple weeks later, just showing her that, hey, at the end of the day, you're going to help clean up whether you like it or not. And guess what? At first, what were you seeing with the hitting, the whining, the fussing? It was all escape motivated behavior. She didn't want to do it. So she'd made people back off. Well, you can't back off to something like that. You got to clean up like everybody else. Okay. Reasonable expectations. She also wanted to throw a fit whenever she couldn't bring something home. We had these little rubber yellow duckies that she liked. It was a problem. Now she's getting upset with her mother because she wasn't allowed to take the little rubber duckies with her. that's what mom had to deal with. And again, a couple weeks later, after teaching her that no, these stay here and you can't take them with you, but they'll be there tomorrow.
Oh, good. Let's go. Come on. Put it down. Put those down. Thank you. Can you open the door? Thank you. Wait right there.
So after a couple of weeks of working with her and the mother, this little girl soon learned that if you just go along with these reasonable requests, you're going to do it anyhow. And you're not going to get away with not doing it by whining or fussing or striking out. You're going to do it, okay? And that's where, again, a lot of times parents have a hard time with it. They don't like to hear their kid cry, okay? But you know what? Sometimes you just got to get through that. And as long as something reasonable, you're not being unreasonable, then that's okay. One of the things that also kind of paralyzes parents sometimes is that, they say, well, the child they don't understand what I'm asking. Well, guess what? They may not understand the words at first. You're working on teaching them the language skills to do that, but they do understand when you start setting some limits. And I think this is where this Elizabeth story, a little girl I worked with, when she was about 3 years of age and she was trying to climb up on the counter in the kitchen where there were sharp knives and different appliances which could be harmful to her. And the parents didn't know what to do. And luckily I was there and I said, well, you need to tell her, you need to stay down. And I physically grabbed her and put her feet back down on the ground. And she started to cry and then she tried to climb again. I said, no, you need to stay down. Started to cry. Started to climb up again. You need to stay down. Pretty soon, she just kind of walked away, crying a little bit, upset. But what did she get? She got the idea that she was not going to climb. I was not going to let her do that. And the parents said, well, we were kind of hesitant because we didn't know, she doesn't understand these words we're saying and she doesn't understand why we're doing it. And I said, no, but she understands that you've set some limits as to what she can and can't do. And climbing up on the kitchen counter is not okay. And it's okay, but you're telling her what you want her to do. You need to stay down. Not saying, don't climb, don't climb, don't climb. Again, that's the negative thing. See, and I told you before, you can see the climbing something you don't want. So don't tell them, don't climb, don't climb. Tell them what you're doing. Stay down, stay down. Find something positive and use that. Oh, I like the way you're staying down in the kitchen. See, now you're watching for her, not trying to climb, and you can reinforce that behavior. Setting limits. Pick the battles carefully, as I like to say. That one was an easy one for Elizabeth there. But pick ones that occur only at certain points. You don't want to be fighting with the kid all day long. You'll give up, okay? But pick one that doesn't require constant monitoring. Okay, that's kind of a quick rule of limits. Don't butt heads on every issue. Avoid some of the major ones at first. Start setting, up the positive rules. What do you want to see? And ensure that if you have set a reasonable limit for something that you can manage, don't back down. But make sure you're reinforcing the appropriate behavior. This is what changes behavior, okay? Dealing with protests, you have to understand that sometimes kids will try hard when it hasn't worked. When it's worked in the past, it worked in the past, and now you're saying it's not working. They're going to be a little ticked off and maybe they will get upset a little bit, but that's predictable. But if you are consistent and you don't reinforce that behavior, we withhold the reinforcement, call that extinction. You're not getting the reinforcement you're expecting. The behavior will change. Okay, they need to learn that the old way of doing things no longer work, but doing what you've asked them to do is going to get them what they want. Because if you reinforce their behavior of protesting once you try to stop them, and now they get even louder and more agitated with you, you still got to make sure not to reinforce that behavior, because if you do, now you've just reinforced them for a behavior. You've reinforced their behavior of escalating. And so what do they learn from that? They've learned that if you don't get what you want when you try to get it, then you just keep getting worse and worse and worse until they give in to you. It's just a matter of when they're going to give it. It's not if, it's when. And that's what you don't want. Okay. So I guess the rule here is think 180 degrees. If you don't like a behavior, you have to identify what you want to see instead, and you need to develop that behavior by reinforcing that behavior or teaching them the new behavior to replace the undesired behavior. And remember, there is a history of reinforcement for doing what they're doing. You're not going to change it overnight. It's going to take time. And it's going to take consistency. You're going to have to stick with it. Okay, it's the undesired behaviors probably worked many times in the past, so why isn't it working now? How can I get it to work is really kind of what their behavior is telling you. But we need to develop a new history for the child and teach them this doesn't work now, this other way works instead. And one of the things that throws a lot of parents is, you know, they see that the behavior is really bad, and then it seems to be getting better, and then all of a sudden they have a bad day and they say, oh, it's not working. Well, yes, it is probably working. You got to stick with it, because what children often do is they test again. And on those days when they test again, they got to find out, no, it still doesn't work that way. It works the other way that I've been teaching, okay? And again, with all these children, if you're working with your own children, the ones that I work with, we should be proud to see them learning new skills. And we really need to focus on the language skills, the imitation skills. We need to teach them, you know, appropriate types of behavior. I always tell people, don't focus on the fact that the child still isn't recovered or cured or indistinguishable, whatever. Just celebrate their progress. You know, if they're making progress and they're learning to take care of themselves more, doing more for themselves, interacting with others more, hooray. You know, let's celebrate that. And again, where should teaching occur? And I always say everywhere. You need to have formal teaching, sometimes structured teaching sessions like you get in the clinic at ARN. But you also need to be training in the natural environment, such as where? Home, the park, stores, car. You're at the zoo, you're at hawker centers, you're at Sentosa, you're at the beach. All of these are reasonable places for them to be learning some new skills. You got to take advantage of that. All right, well, with that, I'm going to end. Went a little longer than I thought I was going to, but that's okay. I hope all of you have obtained some information that might be helpful for you. I want to thank Dino and the staff at ARN for making this presentation possible. You know, they're giving it to you as a gift, and I think this is very, very important. And so, you know, like I say, I'm looking forward to doing more of these in the future. But again, if you have questions, you know, talk to your supervisors, you know, at ARN. They're there for you. They've had a lot of experience, and they can help you, you know, work through some of these issues and give you some clarifications if you're confused on any of the things I talked about today, okay? Anyhow, I wish you all and your kids much success and happiness, and hope to see you again soon. Thanks for giving me your time today. I hope it's helping you.